squishy devils and demons. This is Nurse Hatchet, she-wolf of the Wolf Pack.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and ghouls, step right up. Behind this curtain lies a ghastly concoction of delight, horror, fantasy, and terror. Your every wish is our command, your every whimsical desire brought to life. But I'm warning you, there's always a price. Welcome to the greatest honor!
Eric Morse Project on Blog Talk Radio.
The Eric Morse Project. OutpostFavena.com and Fossil Films presents Astro Atomic Space Dogs Retro Radio Theater, hosted by Balkazar, Emperor of Evil, Child of Destruction, and Astro Atomic Space Dog!
Welcome, humans. This is Balkazar, Emperor of Evil, Child of Destruction, and I'd like to welcome you to Retro Radio Theater. Oh! What was that? Fleabag? Oh yes, this is my co-host, Atomic Space Dog. Okay, yes. The show is titled Retro Radio Theater, and it is Atomic Space Dog, yes. Okay. Astro Atomic Space Dogs Retro Radio Theater. You happy now? Oh, and he says he's not the co-host, he's the star. Excuse me, Atomic Space Dog, you are not the star of the show. After all, it is I who do all the talking. I mean, you're the one that sits here and sounds like a seal. Okay, yes, I know. I am being paid to translate for you. Yes, I understand that. Fine. By the way, what happened to Timmy, your pet human? Why isn't he here doing your translation for you? Oh, he was asking for too much money. Oh, good job, Timmy. So I'm stuck with the flea bag. Oh, joy, oh, bliss. Well, let me say that we are going to have a marvelous show tonight. We are going to just thrill you with some oratories by the great actor Boris Karloff that he did for his show Boris Karloff Presents. They are marvelous and very much well worth listening to. Also, we are going to have a thrilling radio play by our friends at Racks and Razors. It's called Cosmetically Defined. So you can look forward to that, and we'll have some other good things as well. So, Fleabag, what do you say? Do you think it is time for us to start the show and give these people a little thrill here with Boris Karloff? Oh! Very well. So, Retro Radio Theater presents the great actor Boris Karloff. Enjoy.
This is Boris Karloff speaking. I'm here with a story for you from the files of the Reader's Digest. Who killed Chung Ling Soo? The coroner's verdict was death by misadventure, but the fate of magician Chung Ling Soo was almost certainly no accident. The strange story begins in New York 60 years ago. A certain William Ellsworth Robinson, a magician by profession, was broke. Far less skillful men than he were getting all the jobs, and Robinson decided to try a desperate gamble. And so in May 1900, a glittering-eyed man with a queue and flowing oriental raiment registered at a fashionable hotel in London. And with him there travelled a diminutive, slant-eyed maiden. They called themselves the illustrious Chu Ling Soo and his assistant Susie Seen. But back home in America, they'd just been plain Bill and Dottie Robinson. After just one performance at the famed Alhambra, Chung Ling Soo's success was assured. Things went fine for a time. Then into the pretender's paradise came temptation. Her name was Estelle. He was sure that his romance was a secret, until one night he found an anonymous note on his dressing-room table. Be careful. Don't forget that in your bullet-catching trick, your wife loads the guns. Surely Dottie didn't suspect? Or did she? It wore on his nerves. So he decided on a divorce. He'd marry Estelle and end this worrying. And then, unbelieving, he heard his beloved say, "Oh, no, Chung, I could never marry anyone but an American. But I am an American, I'll prove it." Next day, dressed in Western clothes, he called on Estelle. She stared at him shocked. What she saw was an undistinguished man, halting and ordinary in speech. Where was the strange, alluring figure from the East? Miserably, Chung Ling Soo confided in a friend. "It's like having two men in one body," he said. "One wants a woman that he can't have, and the other has a woman that he's afraid of." His friend was worried. "I wish you wouldn't do the bullet-catching trick tonight," he said. "Well, this is the last time I'll ever do it," promised Chung Ling Soo, and went out onto the stage. The trick began as always. 4 spectators were coaxed up onto the stage. Other audience members were asked to examine the bullets. Then Dottie Robinson loading the bullets into guns. Then music, Chung giving the sign, fire. The curtain fell, and behind it, Robinson lay dead in the arms of the innocent Susie Seen. Houdini made a public statement explaining the gun trick. Normally, the bullets never left the guns. The performer carried duplicates in his mouth, but this time the trick mechanism in the guns must have failed to work. But Chung's friend knew that there had been no accident, knew that Chung Ling Soo had been slain on that stage by his envious other self, the killer and the victim falling together in one body. The sad but true story of the wizard Chung Ling Soo is from the Reader's Digest back files, but it bears a resemblance to an article in the current December issue of the magazine, also about some wizardry. In this case, the subject matter is more cheerful. for the wizardry involves some fabulous automatic devices which will do anything from steering an aeroplane to keeping the snakes in the zoo happy. The name of the article is They're Wizards on Control, and I found it most interesting. I'll be joining you soon again with more transcribed stories, but until next time, this is Boris Karloff saying goodbye. This is Boris Karloff speaking. I'm here with a story for you from the files of the Reader's Digest. This is the story of William Shakespeare's hometown. From October to April, life in this ancient market town of Stratford-on-Avon flows as gently as the river itself. But comes the spring, and business booms. Long lines of pilgrims pay their shillings to see the house where Shakespeare was born, his mother's girlhood cottage, the property he bought when he returned as the local ne'er-do-well who had made good. Stratford-on-Avon is now, second only to London, the chief dollar-making tourist haunt in Britain. But it took Stratford 250 years to wake up to its Shakespearean opportunities. In his day, Shakespeare's fellow citizens regarded him as a rather dubious blessing. To them, the theatre was a den of vice. For almost a century and a half, the only outsiders interested in Stratford were occasional scholars, and it wasn't until 1769 that a local landlord was able to rally his townsmen to a public celebration of Shakespeare's anniversary. That year, the great David Garrick came from London to organize a festival with cannon salvos, public breakfasts, and fireworks. There was everything except a Shakespearean performance. For 100 years, this kind of celebration prevailed. Local businessmen made a little bit of pocket money out of the visitors, but the town seemed destined to remain a big, dull village. It was saved from this fate by a bearded giant of a brewer named Charles Edward Flower. It started when, back in 1870, the local folk wanted to erect a monument to Shakespeare. Said Flower, "Shakespeare means plays, good ones. The monument we want is a theatre where people can come and see those plays." Flower scoured England to raise money for a theatre, but the London press and the bigwigs snubbed him. They called Stratford dull, forsaken, and said that its citizens were nobodies. Flower roared back, "We've waited nearly 300 years for the somebodies to do something. Now we'll show what the nobodies can do." He built a theatre with his own money, and Stratford was on its way. Other local citizens went to work to remake their once sleepy community, and they stripped from their homes, shops, and inns the ugly plaster fronts added in later centuries to reveal the fine timbered facades that lined the streets when Shakespeare lived. Fireplaces, cupboards, panels, beams, all the handsome Elizabethan details have been restored. And now the entire town is a living monument to William Shakespeare, shared by the plain folk of Stratford with the people of the whole world. I found the story of Stratford-on-Avon in the Reader's Digest back files, but in the current December issue of the magazine, there's the story of another small city with a big list of visitors. The city of this story is in France. The attraction, not a man, but a cathedral. The cathedral was built many centuries ago by the whole town. Men and women pitted the slight strength of their bodies against the heartless weight of stone to bring heavy limestone blocks from the quarries 7 miles away into the town. Stone by stone, year by year, the church rose. The style in which it grew was new then, the soaring style of the pointed arch and the flying buttress which today we call Gothic, and the town Chartres. The whole story of the miracle of Chartres, the building of the Christmas story in stone, appears in the December issue of the Reader's Digest. I'll be joining you soon again with more transcribed stories, but until next time, this is Boris Karloff saying goodbye. This is Boris Karloff speaking. I'm here with a story for you from the files of the Reader's Digest. The man on the operating table was suffering from a tumor on the brain. Swiftly, the surgeon and newly graduated intern went to work. A few hours later, the patient died. It came as a surprise to no one, for the year was 1895, and in those days, 9 out of 10 patients failed to survive brain surgery. 25 years later, the young intern had reversed the odds. 9 out of 10 patients survived brain operations. His name? Dr. Harvey Cushing. As an undergraduate at Yale, he was a good but uninspired student. But in medical school, in surgery, he found his true vocation, and yet, because of an experience in medical school, Cushing almost gave up medicine. It was regular practice for second-year students to administer ether, and Cushing had served in that capacity only a few times when one of his patients died in the middle of an operation. He blamed himself and decided to give up being a doctor. Only the arguments of friends finally made him change his mind. When Cushing hung up his shingle in Baltimore, his salary as staff physician at a hospital was just $350 a year. Hoping to augment it, the 32-year-old surgeon requested that all cases at Johns Hopkins in which brain surgery was indicated be referred to him. It was only a trickle at first, for doctors almost universally regarded a brain operation as a sentence of death. But as Cushing's brain tumor mortality rate kept dropping, more and more cases came to him, and almost single-handed he had created a new surgical specialty. After America's entry into World War I, Dr. Cushing was commissioned a major and took a surgical team overseas. At home, he had considered a single brain operation a full day's work, but at the front, he tackled as many as 8 a day, operating by candlelight when air alerts had shut off the power. In August 1918, at Chateau Thierry, Cushing came down with an obscure infection of the nervous system. After the armistice, he returned to this country, and slowly, painfully, his fingers regained their skill. He was never able to walk easily again. But Dr. Cushing was as busy as ever. His surgical technique was still advancing, though sometimes he operated sitting down. In a lifetime of brilliant accomplishment, Harvey Cushing was showered with international honors. But he was first of all the friend of sick people in their time of trouble. He could command astronomical fees from the wealthy, but a patient of limited means might find, enclosed with Dr. Cushing's modest bill, a note. "I don't want you to feel bound to pay this account unless you can really manage to do so. But if you can pay it, or can pay part of it in due course, I'll be obliged to you." I found the story of Dr. Harvey Cushing in the back files of the Reader's Digest. But in the current December issue of the magazine, there's the story of another immortal man of medicine, Hideo Noguchi, disease detective extraordinary. Now, if Sherlock Holmes had been lured into a fatal trap by a suspect in his greatest case, his end would have been comparable to the martyrdom of the Rockefeller Institute's incomparable disease detective. For Noguchi died of yellow fever in West Africa, the victim of a murderous microorganism that he had tracked halfway round the world himself. The whole story is in the December issue of the Reader's Digest. I'll be joining you soon again with more transcribed stories, but until then, this is Boris Karloff saying goodbye. This is Boris Karloff speaking. I'm here with a story for you from the files of the Reader's Digest. This is the story of a house. 14 brides have been married in it. 2 silver weddings have been celebrated there. 20 babies were born in the upstairs rooms. The address? Well, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. For more than 150 years, it has been the seat not only of this country's executive power, but of an ideal of American family life. When it was built, a coat of white paint was laid over the gray Virginia sandstone of its walls, and from that day, the people of the nation have called it the White House. The plan for the White House was drawn by Captain James Hoban, an Irishman by birth and a resident of Charleston, South Carolina, who won a $500 prize offered by Congress for the best design, and time has proved it to be a noble one. 14 decades of whimsical fashion have passed through the interior, affecting furniture and draperies, but the house itself, though the oldest public building in Washington, has never gone out of style. The cornerstone was laid on October the 13th, 1792. George Washington, though, didn't live to occupy the house. Labor troubles, congressional slowness, and national poverty combined to delay the work, so that it was still not finished when in 1800 the Adamses threw open its doors at its first reception. Only 14 years later, this fine new first house of the nation was burned during the War of 1812. Fortunately, Mr. Hoban was still alive to guide the reconstruction after the war, and by the time the fashionable Munros entered it, a finer White House opened its doors. From then on, it has gone through much the same evolution as other old American homes. First, it was lit by candlelight, till Fillmore's day in 1851, when gas came in. Then, during the administration of Benjamin Harrison, the new sparkle of electricity. There have almost always been children in the White House. Tyler used to play forfeits with them in the Red Room. Jackson never tired of giving parties to the friends of his 7 grandchildren, and young Willie Lincoln drove his pet goats through the front door. Gaiety and sadness. In the white and gold East Room of the White House have lain in state the bodies of Presidents William Henry Harrison, Taylor, and Harding, who sickened and died in office, and of Lincoln, Garfield, and McKinley, victims of assassination. And at such times the whole room has been draped in black, even to the chandeliers. There's been much debate on the subject of, is the White House haunted by all these voices from the past? In the daytime one isn't likely to think so, but late at night sometimes there does seem to be a feeling of the presence of other lives, and the American people feel the presence in the White House of those lives. So many of them faithful and strong, some few immortally great. We all say amen to the prayer written for that house by its first occupant, James Adams. Heaven bestow the best of blessings on this house, and on all that shall hereafter inhabit it. The story of the White House, which I found in the Reader's Digest back files, is, in a way, the story of life in these United States through the years since its beginning as a nation. But for a more contemporary view of life in these United States, you might refer to the current issue of the magazine, with a whole department of amusing, revealing anecdotes illustrating life in the United States today. I'll be sharing more of the stories with you, transcribed in the near future. But until next time, this is Boris Karloff saying goodbye.
And that was the great actor, Boris Karloff. Oh! Yes, I loved him as Frankenstein myself, Fleabag. So, Fleabag, how are things going with you? Oh, yes. Well, I know the translation thing is a problem, but, you know, we have to live with it. So, let us, continue with the show. What we have for you now in between our radio dramas is a horror radio update featuring our producer, Eric Morse. I hope you enjoy it.
Gore and Scares, everybody. This is Eric Morse with a horror news update. For those of you who are fans of the Halloween musical band Midnight Syndicate, I know I am, This band has actually finished production on a film. That's right. Midnight Syndicate Films is proud to present The Dead Matter, which stars Andrew Divoff, Jason Carter, and none other than the master of gore himself, Tom Savini. The story of this film is about a sad woman who is grieving over her dead brother. She manages to get her hands on a relic that has occult power, and she brings her brother back to life. Unfortunately, actually, very fortunately, chaos ensues as the dead start coming back to life. Fun and thrills for everybody. Let's check out the trailer on this.
From the unknown. Even something as dark as this.
I failed one night. Brought someone back from the other side.
How long are you going to keep doing this to yourself, Gretchen? Shall we never...
I have no idea. The beginning.
Good job, Midnight Syndicate. Dead Matter will be released July 30th, 2010. I'm not sure if it's going to be a theatrical release or on DVD. Our final bit of horror news deals with Christopher Smith's directorial triangle, which stars Melissa George, Liam Hemsworth, and Michael Duran. This film deals with a bunch of friends who get together boating on a yacht in the Atlantic Ocean. Suddenly, the weather turns sour, and they are forced to take shelter on an abandoned ship. Believe it or not, an abandoned cruise ship. And strange things start happening. Sounds very interesting. Anyways, let's check out the trailer on that one.
You know what I do when I have a bad dream? I close my eyes and I think of something nice.
So let's go sailing.
Wind's dropped out on us.
Get below deck now. Get the life jacket. Oh, thank God. Where is everybody?
You enter a place you have never been.
I recognize this course.
Everything you see, you have seen before.
It's starting over again. That's what's going on. Everything that happened to you happened to me before. He's dead! We changed the pattern. We changed the pattern in our track. Who are you?
Triangle will be released on February 2nd. Well, be ready on January 30th because our internet magazine, Racks and Razors, will have their special guest Midnight Syndicate. Anyways, this is Eric Morse, Gore and Scares everybody, and see you at the movies.
Well, that was very interesting. Thank you, Eric Morse. That Dead Matter film sounds very interesting. Lots of evil creatures there to entertain us. Oh yes, that sounds excellent. So, now we can start with our other thrilling radio play. It comes from our dear friends over at Racks and Razors, and it is entitled Cosmetically Defined. I hope you enjoy it. Oh, oh, oh! So does the flea bag. Enjoy.
Welcome again to the Racks and Razors radio play. You're in for a treat because I call this episode Cosmetically Defined.
A short distance from the wailing sirens and the heat of the city summer, there is relief in the oceanside suburb of Seaforth. Early evening, just before dinner, a sea breeze gains entry to this cul-de-sac through a set of manned steel security gates. The doctor wind stirs the vodka drinks that chase the mail-order painkillers down the throats of the neighborhood wives. It helps them relax when their indulgent days are disrupted by their children's return home from school. The automated sprinklers switch on to keep the green grasses greener, even as the city verges on a dry reservoir.
Being asked to refrain from watering your lawn until the ban has been lifted. There is panic in the suburbs tonight as a child has gone missing in the wealthy enclave of Seaforth, just east of the Pacific Highway. A neighbor, who is a close family friend, claims to have returned the young girl to her family home after a soccer practice at about 7:30 yesterday evening. The neighbor waited as the 8-year-old let herself into the house. The girl's mother arrived home at 11:30 p.m. to find her daughter missing, and the little girl's dinner was still in the microwave. A pair of shoes were found this morning on the west side of the highway by a local man walking his dog. It is not known if the shoes belong to the missing child. Police are surveying the area closely.
Fine cuts of meat crackle on stainless steel outdoor grills, only to be swept into the garbage or secreted by servants, while the mothers nibble the edges of tablets and the children mutely munch microwavables. Parents and children eat silently and separately at opposite ends of impossible houses. Maids load the dishwasher and lace their little master's shoes for soccer practice, while the mothers, dressed in cool whites and pastels, put on their faces and cover their eyes with dark glasses the size of road signs. A lonely man manages his hair with anxious flop sweat and tilts the blinds to watch the neighborhood children and their mothers. Fingernails and teeth sparkle and glint in the sunlight as the families perform a synchronized turn out of their driveways and converge at a park less than 3 blocks away.
Stay near me tonight. Don't go down the hill. Stay on this side of the tree line.
Is it safe? My friend wasn't at school today. Do you know where she is?
How should I know? Nobody knows. She's missing. Sweetheart, you'll be safe if you stay beside me. If you're not on the field, you're at my side. Okay?
Ouch, your nails are sharp.
I had them done today. Little diamond dolphins. Aren't they nice?
They're fake.
Beside the field, a group of neighbors has surrounded a young officer who is nodding sympathetically with his right hand locked around his opposite wrist. The group assails him with questions and comments regarding the case. Officer James Timms has been hand-picked based on his psychological profile and personal history to absorb some of the shock in the Seaforth community. He was torn from a magazine, bronzed and pinstriped white, and the sunglasses he wore to conceal his own judging eyes were every bit as big and dark as theirs.
I don't understand why you're my daughter. How do I do this now? You're missing. And you're sitting back and you're not going to be done. We need answers. We need answers. Why isn't anybody doing anything?
Daphne, here. Who is he?
Hi, Kimmy. Have you heard anything?
Nothing at all. They said they would phone soon. I want the cops out of my media room and my daughter home.
Give them time. They must be thorough.
What's being said?
Nothing that we've not heard already. I haven't heard anything new.
Is there a suspect? Henry? Have they talked to him? Asked him where he was Sunday night?
They've asked us all. Most of us were here. Except for Henry, and they know that.
Does he know that man spends his time gawking at all of us through the binoculars? Or that he's never spoken a word to any of us?
No. We should tell him.
The young officer had grown up in a suburb just like this one, and he knew how to handle their iced fingers in his face. He had been wet-nursed and spoon-fed by strangers, while his father and mother played the parts of philanthropical pharmaceutical mogul and first wife of same. James spent the second half of his childhood living in a small but paid-for house downtown. His father bought it in secret just before he left on a boat with a dancer. In exchange for non-disclosure, his mother was medicated free for a lifetime by his father's company. The pills kept her almost always asleep. While his mother filled the space of her displaced lifestyle with tranquilizers, he occupied his own with an enthusiasm for uncovering evidence of the everyday. His head turned less toward shiny things and more toward tools that he could use to survive. He left his plain blue synthetic blend uniform at home, knowing that it would do nothing to inspire respect for authority in this circle. It would only mark the difference between their fabrics. He wore what any inoffensive person wears, cotton. The women who encircled him showed no trace of their self-destructive behavior. They did not have flat, sallow skin, though they puffed at French cigarettes with bottomless glasses of white at lunch, from which they did not acquire the fluffy paunch of the pedestrian alcoholic. They remained toned and glowing, their exteriors somehow resistant to any evidence of abuse. He lowered his head and smiled as wide as is acceptable when speaking to someone whose child is missing.
Evening, everyone. I'm Officer James. I wanted to come down personally and
Good. Look, there's someone we need to talk to you about.
The man's home was his capsule. All his belongings were strewn in sloppy rays from a well-worn position on a sofa he had been sitting on since childhood. He was a timid man who had only been daring once in his lifetime, when he had removed the plastic covers from the living room furniture following his mother's death. He had cared for her after his father's death until her own, and then the family house became his. Henry's father had been a hunter-fisher, and the walls of the house wore that fact, velvet hangings of stags and does, average-sized trout mounted on pieces of driftwood, a dark nighttime photograph of his father in youth, holding up two hands adorned with limp white rabbits that hung from his fingers. His father had hunted. Henry watched birds. He spent hours at the window with binoculars, making check marks beside the cited entries in the index of his Audubon guide. In between these sessions, he attempted small watercolors of the birds he had seen. The highway behind the house bisected the stand of tall pines that the birds liked to sit in, and so, in watching towards the highway for birds, Henry had also noticed a lot of other things. There was a long road adjacent to the rear gate of Henry's property.
Twice a week. Twice a week, a big white truck with a blue dolphin. Twice a week it leaves the property, and twice a week it returns. And only twice a week does any civilian car enter or exit the property. Same car every time. Silver. And through a gate that must be opened by someone other than the driver. Not until this week. One red SUV was allowed in, and escorted out very quickly. No signs at the gate, no writing on the truck. I've never seen anyone outside of one of those vehicles. They don't wear uniforms. Nobody or nothing else with them. What could they be making that's so small and doesn't take any work to make, and pays for this real estate?
Henry thought about this. He thought, and he thought. He thought that it could only be drugs, or bits of technology, or information. He thought that he should find out what the truck with the blue dolphin carried.
Map. My map. I'll have to take one of the smaller roads down to the water. Can't just go straight down the driveway. There's at least one camera pointed at the entry, mounted high up like a bird of prey on a treetop. Gotta go down to the water and up from behind.
The sun was setting. A low lateral orangey smear crushed to the bottom of the horizon by the weight of the city's dirt. Henry crossed the highway and entered the industrial area. Great blocks of concrete Lego and piles of metal rods were divided into groups by a network of dirt roads and lesser pathways. As he walked into the trees and north up the beach, the outside grew quiet around him. The trees absorbed the noise of all the machines, the chug and whir of the other factories, and the screech and whine of people passing quickly in a long, gentle arc. He approached the factory and was expecting to hear its work. He heard nothing. He saw no smoke, only rows and rows of barred windows, and only one with any light at all. And that one light was very dim, but it certainly had to illuminate something, or somebody wouldn't have switched it on. Henry crawled along the stone wall and sat beneath the gently glowing and ever so slightly open window. He had been sitting in wait for a long time when he heard an interior door open. And then a woman's voice.
The point of entry is the ear canal. The cable is telescopic. Insert it, extend it, and hold it for the gathering. Then retract it. She has been given a sedative. Watch for the biting. The young have not yet learned to suppress the urge to bite when afraid. Just last week, a young one bit a piece out of a doctor. She had been issued her injection and was on the verge of sleep. She held that morsel of meat in her mouth and just smiled. Just a little. The way that all children do when they turn to dreaming.
Henry sat and shook.
It takes only a few seconds to extract the essential qualities of youthful appearance. Fullness, luminosity, sparkle. The dew will dry from her face. Her lips will wrinkle slightly as the plump drains. The shine will then leave her hair from end to root, and some other things you can't see will leave her completely. Of course, some things cannot be removed. They're untraceable, but our attempt at extraction alters their composition, and they will never be the same again. And that's practically the same as being gone completely. Pity we can't get those.
Through half-closed eyes, the child notices a bundle of instruments and a syringe larger than the one used to inject the sedative. She wonders if the doctors will use all of the tools, or only one.
What are you doing? What are you cleaning that one for? What do you use to clean?
This is painless. We're just tracing you. We insert this in your ear painlessly. We record your unique patterns and rhythms and then apply those into production.
Production?
The humming of this tiny computer can cause some pain. It does work very hard during the extraction, even harder if it finds a girlish laugh it likes. Are you sleeping? Yes, she is. Switch it on.
Too wobbly to spring up, Henry grew into an L shape like a vine around the frame of the window. By the time that he could see through the window, the device had been retracted, and the doctor had turned her back and walked out the door. The girl looked chalky, and her head turned, and she set her black eyes on the window. Her body was free, and she moved toward it.
I'll pull you through the window, quick. I'll pull you through the bars. Give me your hand.
Why are you in the night?
Maybe to get you. Push yourself through. I'll make sure you don't fall.
I don't know who you are either. I don't even know you.
Henry crouched below the window in a raised, prepared-to-crash pose. The small girl slid easily through the security bars and tumbled onto Henry, plunging her knees into his back.
You live beside me. You watch us. My mother has photos of you watching us.
The child turned to run from the man her mother had warned her about, but she was still heavily sedated. It can be quite confusing for a city girl to find her way without a streetlight. She dragged herself, trotting through ferns and tripping on dried stumps toward the light from the highway. She stepped and paused her way through a formation of death-wishing 20-somethings riding Japanese bikes colored like shells and wings of insects. She was traveling both down and across the highway.
Stop! Wait!
Daphne glossed her lips and strutted toward Officer James as a slip of a child appeared on the field, long-armed and stumbling through the long marsh grasses at the tree line. She was wet from the creek, and her hair was pasted to her face with hot sand turned up by the motorbikes. Her eyes were black and as dull as rubber. She fell to the ground as daintily as a feather. She mouthed silent words to her distracted mother, who was pointing at Henry surfacing from the creek just behind her.
Officer James, it's him. That's the man. Child. My child. Come here.
The man who? He's still in that building. The man is just one of those dark rooms. This is your daughter, you know? And and you. It was your truck, officer. Their luminosity. Measure it. It's not theirs. They're regenerating.
Henry! You need to come to the station and answer my questions now. You know, these people are angry. Ladies, follow us to the station. Kimberly, Daphne, you can ride in your own car. I'll have my partner escort you. Henry, now.
Officer James guided Henry into the unmarked police car with a gentle hand on the man's shoulder. He waited for Henry to buckle his seatbelt. He opened his own door, sat down, and unzipped the child's backpack. She had stared at him and discreetly transferred it to him as she waited for her mother to notice her return. The two women raised two fingertips to the officer as they were led out of the parking lot by another unmarked car. He returned a smile and pulled a simple white glass jar out of a bag. Pressed into the glass, in a plain font, "Dolphin Cosmetics. May contain traces of human."
Cosmetically Defined. Written by Carrie Eno. Directed by Heath Herrera. Greg Russell Titterington as Henry. Cheryl Thompson as Daphne. Elizabeth McQuaid as Kimberly. Tyrone Terrius as William. Margot Berner as Child. Wendy Podgurski as Doctor. Huey Phillips as the news anchor. Keith Herrera as Officer James. And Dick Pugh as the narrator. Edited by Josiah Truscott. Engineered by Johnny Cockles. Music by Midnight Syndicate. www.racksandrazors.com.
Well, Atomic Space Dog, it appears that there's, stuff going on in the background. I'm sorry about that. It's very hard when we're trying to do a show here. Anyways, so that was Cosmetically Defined. So, in honor of our other show that's coming next week, Horror Chat, we have a special musical thing for you. Enjoy.
That's where he keeps all his secrets, and the one that he cannot replace. In there are his memories that could have been a couple of dreams. But in the last cabin on the left, there's a side of him you don't want to see. You can knock him down, but he'll always get back up again. Countless times he's been put to sleep. You can't kill the legend. By now you know. You hope you'll live to see light again. Stick around, I promise you. You'll die when you see how it ends. The curse to claim that it holds. And every time that he's breathing, the blood is flowing out of control. Now you know I'm not dreaming, and you know about Camp Crystal Lake. You know about all the secrets, so get out of here before it's too late. You can knock him down, but he'll always get back up again. Countless times he's been put to sleep, but you can't kill the legend. By now you know. You hope you'll never see him again. Stick around, I promise you. You'll die when you see how it ends.
that was Count Six Strings, the host of Horror Chat, with By Now You Know. This is Balkazar, Emperor of Evil, Child of Destruction, and you are listening to Retro Radio Theater. Unfortunately, we've had some technical difficulties this time, but I hope that next week, or actually next month when we do it, it'll be a lot better. Alrighty, so at this time, we will listen to our listing of sponsors. Enjoy.
The Eric Morse Project is sponsored by DK New York Effects, featuring the work of Gene Marza. Dr. Blood's Video Vault. Associate sponsors are HorrorDemons.com, BenevolentStreet.com. Official copy place of our show is the Daily Boost, Courthouse Square, Redwood City, California. All of our shows are dedicated to the Internet Mistress of Horror, Dark Spider. This is Balkazar, Emperor of Evil, Child of Destruction, for the Eric Morse Project.
Yes, well, that was pre-recorded. Anyways, next month, Retro Radio Theater will not be on. In its place, our producer, Eric Morse, will be doing his Valentine's Day special. So, since we do have a minute left, I will keep you up on the schedule for the Eric Morse Project. Next week, we will have Horror Chat. And then, on January 30th, we will have the new Racks and Razors, our horror magazine show. Then the first week in February, we will have a special, The Night with Horror Chat. And after that, it will be, of course, the Valentine's Day special, which I know all the ladies will be thrilled with. I know I'm thrilled, and I'm not even taking part in it, but you know. Anyways, this is Balkazar, Emperor of Evil, Child of Destruction, along with my Fleabag host, Atomic Space Dog, saying farewell. On our switchboard tonight, we of course had our producer, Eric Morse, though he didn't do much of a good job this time. Too much noise in the background and all that. But, it'll clear up. Alrighty. Well, I will catch you next week. Oh!
Phoenix Comics+Toys. Hello, creeps. Get your one-of-a-kind custom horror host figurines. That's right, kiddies. Oh, you can find hosts like the Keymaster, Mummy and the Monkey. I just love that name. Mr. Lobo, or even Carlos Borloff's Monster Madhouse. Tell him your bony little friend, the Crypt Keeper, sent you. It won't get you a discount, but it might get you killed. Phoenix Comics+Toys.
It's Spooky Boo from Spooky Boo Scary Story Time. Grab a glass of wine, a nice warm blanket, and a pair of headphones and listen to the spooky tales of the internet. Some of the stories I write, some are creepypasta, others are sent in by listeners. You'll enjoy falling asleep to these spooky, scary stories. Now get ready, and I'll see you in your nightmare.